The current car market is pricing out the average American. This is a reality that is not new. In fact, if you've been paying attention to the car market, the reality of expensive new and used cars is something that you're probably very familiar with. But even if you are someone who is well aware that car prices are higher than they used to be, the sticker shock on a used car purchase can be, well, shocking. In fact, I can personally relate to this because in the last couple of weeks, my dad is looking at buying a new to him used car. And being a grandfather of two, he was considering getting a van, something like a Toyota Sienna with relatively low miles and decently new. And I remember whenever he told me this, I told him, hey, I think that's a good purchase, but if you're looking to buy a used, relatively new Sienna, you better be prepared to spend a lot of money because newer Siennas are very expensive. To which he responded, yeah, we think we've come to terms that if we want something nice, we'll just have to pay a premium price for it. He then goes on to say that he would be open to spending something around $25,000 for this used car. And this is the reality that many car buyers, but especially car buyers like my dad, who buy a new or used car maybe once every 10 years, have to come to terms with. Cars are extremely expensive, and the days of getting a slightly used, high-value car for $20,000 to $25,000, those days are over. And this isn't a shock, or at least it really shouldn't be, because as I mentioned earlier, this has unfortunately been the reality for millions of car buyers for the better part of the last 3 years. But what is becoming more and more apparent, and is also relatively shocking, is the fact that now more and more affluent, wealthy Americans are also getting priced out of the new car market as well, or at least new cars are becoming hard to justify even for the most wealthy people. According to an Edmunds study, nearly half of car shoppers in America expect to pay less than $35,000 for a new car, when in reality the average price for a new car today is $48,205, which is up 21% from 5 years ago. And as a result of this price gap between what people think new cars currently cost and what new cars actually cost, this same Edmunds study found that 74% of consumers are actually holding off on their new vehicle purchase. The average monthly payment on a new car is currently $767 per month, which is up 17% from 4 years ago. But 1 in 6 car buyers currently pay $1,000 a month or more on their vehicle monthly payment. And this is something that I've talked about on my channel probably dozens of times at this point, but the reality is, truly no matter how you slice it, that the average American with the average income cannot afford the monthly payment of the average new car. And this is just a fact. It's really end of story. According to a Bloomberg study following this exact same topic, the top fifth of American households with an average annual income of $265,000 accounted for 55% of expenditures on new vehicles last year, which is up from 40% in 2020. And people with income between 16 grand and 41 grand are only making up about 6% of the total new car buyers, which truthfully is probably higher than it really should be. And you may think, or at least automakers may want to believe you to think, that car buyers aren't buying new cars because of car prices, but instead they're not buying these cars because of other outside factors like the overall economy, cost of groceries, outside priorities. And while these are absolutely factors at play when we talk about the overall car market, it doesn't negate the fact that whenever we look at average incomes and average car prices, the average American has been priced out. And in many, many cases, the average income earner just simply cannot afford the average new car. Basic financial fundamentals show that you shouldn't be spending more than 10% of your monthly take-home pay on your car payment, and no more than 20% once we take into account repairs and maintenance and insurance. The median household take-home income, according to a 2022 census, was $64,240. Keep in mind, this is 2022 data, but it is the most recent data that we have for this report, and this is also household income, so if you are an individual who isn't married, this may be skewed against you. Based off of this math, the average household should not be spending more than $535 per month on their car payment, but the average new car has a $767 car payment, which is 43% more than what the average car payment should be for the average income earner. And this again doesn't even really begin to tackle the outside nuance whenever it comes to affording a car, like interest rate, insurance, which is also at record highs, and maintenance costs, which is also going up as well. All of these making cars extremely unaffordable, but also make spending a lot on a car a very risky and in many cases irresponsible purchase. And you can also see here that this wasn't always the case. This is a graph of the number of weeks of income needed to afford the average car. While it has no doubt improved over the last year, it is still far off from where it was back pre-pandemic, and that's a major problem. And this is a topic that I think many of us think about all the time because cars are so in our faces. I know that whenever I'm driving around, running errands, or just driving on the road, I will oftentimes look at these cars that surround me and wonder how the heck are people able to afford them? And I've spoken to other people who also feel the same way, so I feel like this discussion of car affordability is one that many of us think about very consistently. And while the question of how are people able to afford their cars is something that I do think about often, another thing that I think about very frequently, frustrating it is that the car market has pivoted so much over the last few years. Because even more frustrating than the sheer price of cars in today's market is the reason why these car prices have become so high. And if you've watched my videos before, you probably know the direction that I'm going into, because this is a topic that I've been beating like a dead horse for a couple of years now, because it is something that I believe is a major problem. And this is the fact that these price hikes that we're seeing in new cars is not a supply and demand issue. They aren't an inflation issue, at least not in the traditional sense. And it isn't even necessarily traditional price gouging like what we saw in grocery stores during the pandemic. The problem that we're currently experiencing with new car prices is almost solely due to the fact that automakers have stopped producing basic cheap cars. From the Toyota Yaris, Honda Fit, Ford Focus, Ford Fusion, Mitsubishi Mirage, Kia Rio, Hyundai Accent, Chevy Spark, Chevy Cruze, the list goes on. And you can see here on this graphic that I found online just how far automakers have gone in cutting their cheaper, smaller, basic cars. Back in 2012, vehicles priced below $30,000 accounted for more than half of the new car market by units, while models $50,000 and up were only 6% of US vehicle sales. Today, that's completely flipped, and models above $50,000 account for 44% of new car sales, while offering below $30,000 represents only 12.7% of new car sales. And sub $20,000 vehicles have virtually disappeared and represent only 0.1% of new vehicle sales. And this is almost solely due to the fact that automakers have almost completely pivoted their focus from the cheaper car into more expensive cars, and as a result, automakers are making record revenue while selling less units of cars. And so if these automakers can successfully sell less cars but make more money, why would they adjust what they're doing and sell cheaper cars that ultimately make less margin? Well, they don't want to. And I know what the response to this probably will be for some people who watch this video, and that's going to be something to the effect of, well, automakers stopped selling basic cars because people stopped buying them. And while this is a little bit true in some regards, over the last few years, more basic cars have ended up decreasing in sales. This isn't true across the board, and automakers are seeing that some of their cheapest models are really excelling in the 2024 car market, like the Ford Maverick, for example, or the Chevy Trax. The other sort of disclaimer / caveat that I also want to offer here is the fact that, generally speaking, I don't think people should be buying new cars. If you're making $41,000 per year, you should not be buying a new car. I am a firm believer that the idea of buying a new car simply because it's more reliable, buying used means buying someone else's problems, or buying used because you don't want somebody's sloppy seconds, these are silly, antiquated beliefs, and they're also the same belief systems that get people into a cycle of debt because they buy new cars that they then have to eat the depreciation on. If you make a lot of money and you can afford to buy new and you want to buy new and you are fully aware of the cost of that purchase from not only a sheer dollar value but also depreciation perspective, then go ahead and buy new. I don't care. But if you are a middle of the road American who makes an average income, then I would go as far as to say that not only should you not buy new, but I would also say that it's irresponsible to do so. The reason why I'm so passionate about this issue is because these high new car prices also trickle down into the used market as well, and they make used cars more expensive. And this is something that I see every single day. When the average cost of a new car goes up, the average cost of a used car also goes up, because previously the used car market was full of cheaper cars that were now used and thus even cheaper, but now the used car market is becoming filled with more expensive used cars, which are cheaper than buying those same cars new, but they aren't cheaper than buying a cheaper car used. Additionally, the sticker shock on new car purchases that we talked about earlier, that also has a trickle-down effect on the car market as well. I had mentioned earlier in the video that people who are looking to buy new cars get sticker shock from the high price, and thus they decide to just hold off and hold on to their current car. And thus they wait to trade in or sell their used car, and thus clogging up the used car market supply. As people choose to hold off on buying cars, this means that less used cars are entering the market, which makes the selection of used cars even less and the price point of these cars less varied, which creates a bit of an inventory problem for used car buyers. And my final thoughts here with this video is the fact that I think that this is going to cause a really severe problem. And unfortunately, when it comes to how this is going to impact the economy and the car market as a whole, I unfortunately think that it's going to get worse before it gets gets better. Because for the last 3 years, people have been able to avoid buying cars by simply holding on to their old one. But at some point for many car buyers, holding on to their old car won't be an option anymore. Maybe their car gets wrecked, maybe it breaks down, maybe they have a change of circumstance like a growing family and they need to get a bigger car. And these people will either have to come to terms with the massive depreciation that their COVID vehicle purchase has had in the last few years, and or they'll have to swallow the pill of a high car payment, and thus trickling into other aspects of life. And it could lead to them falling behind on their car payments. It could lead to them having to go delinquent on their car loan. It could end up causing them to have to cut back on other spending because their car is so expensive. Cars are almost like a tax that many Americans have to pay compared to other types of countries because of the fact that many parts of America are not walkable. I've said this before, but for example, I live in Dallas, Texas. I have to have a car. Sure, I don't have to have a nice car, but I have to have a car to get around because Dallas doesn't have any transportation and you can't really walk. This is true with so many cities and states throughout the country, and as a result, so many Americans have to buy a car. And as cars have gotten more and more expensive, this has become in many regards an unavoidable cost. And sure, nobody has to buy a $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 car. In fact, many people shouldn't. Even the most affordable basic cars are very expensive. Not to mention, again, these underlying issues like high maintenance costs, high insurance costs, interest rate. This is, of course, the result of the pandemic and economic hardships, but it's also absolutely the effect of corporate greed and the fact that corporations and automakers have chosen to prioritize high trim, expensive, high margin vehicles over affordable ones. And I predict that this is going to have extreme long-term consequences. Don't forget that my courses, the Car Sharing Masterclass and the Car Buying Masterclass, are on sale for Black Friday until November 30th. You can get the Car Sharing Masterclass for $275 off by using the code BlackFriday275, and you can get the Car Buying Masterclass for $125 off by using the code BlackFriday125. Like always, you guys, I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, comments, if you have anything to add, I would love to hear it, so make sure to leave a comment down below. And while you guys are at it, make sure to hit the like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit that notification bell, and I will see you guys in the next video.